Hi, everyone. Welcome back, Critical Conversations. Today, I am so excited. I have G.lamour on. She is a licensed mental health therapist, and we have been in each other's universe for a little over a year now. We met in a momentum education training, and I've just been loving watching Grace as she builds her private practice and really not only supports people on their mental health and well-being, but like sharing her vulnerable story and sharing her insights. And I think that she is going to bring some epic dialogue to today's conversation. So pull up a seat. Grace, what did I miss? What do you want the world to know about you?
I think you got me covered, Karissa. I appreciate you. I'm a clinician. I'm a lover of people of all walks of life. An avid reader, a New Yorker forever and ever. A
Yeah.
child of immigrants.
Yeah, where are you from? Let's start there for just a brief sec.
So my parents are from Haiti, from the western part of Haiti. So that's Port-au-Prince. So if you've been looking at the news where all the mess is at, that's where my people are from. But they're from all over.
Gotcha.
I am born and raised in New York City. I'm probably always going to live here. I might have homes other places, but I'm probably always going to live here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
New York for life. Okay, amazing. So today we are going to talk about pseudo self-care. Tell me what comes up for you when I say that word.
Yeah, so pseudo self-care is the belief and the perception that we are actually taking care of ourselves with external things, when in actuality we should also be looking internal in order to have self-care. So we always hear about the parameters of taking days off and bubble baths and trips to Sephora and quote unquote protecting our peace. And while all those things are important and we don't want to undermine the joy that those things bring, they are not a band-aid for what is really going on internally. So pseudo self-care is also a practice that is being told to us by our social media outlets about if our lives look a certain way, then we should be okay. If we have a certain amount of money, then we should be okay. If we have these beautiful organizers in our refrigerator, then we should be okay. When in actuality, we should also be looking at the other systems in our lives that make us feel that we have to be pushed in order to have this quote unquote this perfection around our lives, which is leading us to burnout. So looking at it from a space of like internally, why do I feel like I need all these external things?
Yeah. What am I masking, right? What's the Band-Aid? Yeah. And it's so interesting. So you sent me these topics yesterday or this morning, and in my own personal life, I've been looking at this as well. And it's been kind of this theme of this week. And I love that, like, that's the divinity of my life, is usually when I'm meant to be having certain conversations, there's repetitive themes. So one of the repetitive themes you brought up is, looking at social media and being like, oh, I need this, this, and this, and then I'm going to be happy. I literally had a conversation with a really good friend the other day. She was like, you're bypassing your experience. Like, you need to sit down and sit with your experience. So I actually reached out to my counselor, who my husband and I have been seeing off and on. We've gone together. He's gone alone. I've never gone alone, but I reached out and I was like, I gotta process this. I gotta go through this and stop bypassing it, because it keeps showing up. It's a reoccurring theme. So let's talk about that, because I also was listening to a podcast last night, and it was the same thing of like, on the outside, you might have all these things. Like, you may have climbed that mountain, hit that peak, and been like, yes, but then you sit down and you're like, wait. So tell me about this. When you're looking, when you're saying like, we got to look at it, what does that mean? What do people need to be doing?
They need to be looking at their accomplishments as a part of their lives and not their whole identity.
Okay, so so we are associating an identity with accomplishments. What happens?
Absolutely.
Yeah, what happens when
Absolutely.
we do this?
So what we're doing is we're not recognizing that without the job, without the marriage, without the accolades, without the money, we still are us. Your character, your value system is your identity. Your title as a CEO or business owner, or the relationships that you have to people, those are identities that are they're on hold, they're on rent while you're on the planet.
Oh, snap. That is a mic drop. I'm going to say that again. Your identities that you're holding on to are on rent.
They are.
So, what's the work here?
The work here is understanding that your identity cannot be in correlation to the things that are external of yourselves.
Yeah.
So, it's recognizing while relationships are very important, especially as women, right? We are taught in a patriarchal society, no matter race or culture, that our value is in the kind of mom that we are, the kind of wife that we are, the kind of friend we are, daughter, sister. And there's never any conversation about who you are as a woman. Like individually, who is this person outside of the relationships that they are?
I have goosebumps.
Okay.
I love this. And I think that this is it. Like this is the conversation people need to be having. And you need to be having it with yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a supportive environment. So what is that actually let's start here. Like why do we avoid this? Why are we masking
we avoid
this
because we are socialized to think that our value is only what we can provide for people. And this is not only a woman conversation, this is an everyone conversation. And it's the same parameters around how the patriarchy hurts men, where their perception is, well, he doesn't have X amount of this and he doesn't have X amount of that, so he doesn't have value. And what ends up happening is for a lot of men, especially the men that I work with in my own practice, is that they have tied their identity so much to what they make or what job title that they have. There is no recognition for the emotional work that they actually have to do in order to be happy. And it's like, it's fantastic. You have this beautiful car and this beautiful home, and you're the golden boy in your family dynamics, but you don't have any emotional regulation. You don't know anything about connection. You don't recognize that there are some things around the parameters of your life, whether it be relationally, emotionally, that those things probably shouldn't have happened to you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a book that Oprah co-wrote, and I talked about this on another podcast episode, where it was What Happened to You.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we never give ourselves the opportunity to process that. We're constantly like bypassing, oh, I got to go to work. I got to go do that. Like it's all those like I have to or I should be doing. So where does somebody start?
It's recognizing that you as a person are not a monolith. That's one. And unfortunately in Western culture, there is a lot of push around individualism, which has left people so isolated where they cannot relate and communicate with people from different walks of life, or to even get some insight around, you don't have to live this way. But because when you're left alone, isolation leaves you only to your thoughts and your belief system. So there's no space for growth mindset. What you believe becomes gospel for you, when in actuality, your beliefs can change. But if you are not constantly being in a space to surround yourself with community, surround yourself with people who are actually happy. They may not have all the accolades, but like you ever see some people and they just have some joy about them?
Yeah.
And it's like they don't have everything, but they have joy. And having joy is everything, actually. Right? So it's recognizing when I am not feeling at my best, or I have all these thoughts chattering in my mind, who are my safe people? And who are my people who kind of ignite my trigger? And what does my trigger look like? My trigger may look like spaces where I abandon myself. My trigger may look like I feel isolated. My trigger may look like I'm not taking care of myself in like a physiological way. Emotionally, I'm not taking care of myself. I'm engaging in relationships because of familiarity and because we share a bloodline. I engage in relationships that are not that are not good for me.
Oh my God. I don't even know where to start because I wrote down like 10 things. I think I'm going to start with where you just left off because I think this is going to be really beneficial. This is actually a theme of my life. It's what I'm going to go and chat with my counselor. So you said a trigger is I forget exactly how you said it, but it was something along the lines of family bloodline. Like,
Mm-hmm.
keep talking about that because
Okay.
that is my trigger where
Mm-hmm.
I'm struggling. You know, I want to have a healthy relationship with my family, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of that one person. And this actually ties into another thing that you talked about the isolation blocking the growth mindset, right? And being open to change your beliefs and thought patterns. And this is where I struggle. And so I
Mm-hmm.
know my audience struggles with this because what I'm going through is often what we teach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So nobody in my family seems like they care to grow or gain
Mm-hmm.
emotional intelligence, but I'm trying. So like talk to me about that trigger. Like, what do we do in these situations?
Well, first and foremost, we have to look at where our boundaries have to be instilled. We have to look at the relationships that are, whether in close proximity with us, whether in immediate family or just like physical space, if you live in close proximity to these individuals, so you will probably see them on a regular basis. What
Right.
does that relationship have to shift to? And that's not on some like, get out of my face, fuck you. That's not what that is.
Right.
That's a conversation where I value this relationship and I'm not going to project who I want you to be, but these are the things that I will not accept from you. So
That's it.
I'm not going to accept disrespect from you. I'm not going to accept that you feel entitled to my time. I'm not going to accept that you say things that are condescending or hurtful. I'm not going to accept that you are saying mess about my parenting because you don't think that I'm parenting my children correctly. I'm not doing any of that. I love you, but I love me more.
Yeah. And it's so hard, it's so hard. That's it for me. It's so let's talk about that for a second. So is it having those conversations? Is it your own awareness of the boundary? Like, how does somebody navigate that, right?
Mm-hmm. It's recognizing if you are having the same negative reaction or interaction, there probably has to be a boundary that needs to be set.
Yeah.
Well,
So
we're not. Go ahead.
I was just going to say our triggers should be like guideposts to where change needs to happen. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And recognizing if you are apprehensive about setting a boundary, that means you probably should, because boundaries are not things that are easy to set. And in most family dynamics, boundaries are not conversations that are had.
Right.
A lot of relationships across culture and race is there's a hierarchy between parent and child, and
Definitely.
children have to obey no matter what the circumstances, or in some scenarios children have to live the life that the parents have set up for them, and parents are living their lives through children, which then just breeds this life of uncertainty, unhappiness, difficulty, even going as far as like addictions, things
Mm-hmm.
of that nature, like because you're trying to appease everyone and not living your truth. So like I took on this job because mom and dad said that I would be making a lot of money and I don't want to let the family down. So now I'm paid, but I'm sad.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
how do you even enjoy the money? You're sad.
Right. And this ties into what you were bringing up at the beginning, this, pseudo self-care, where it's like, okay, so that person, right, is then going to go on social media or listen to their best friend and be like, okay, I need to hire an organizer. And once my home is organized, I'll feel better. Or, oh, I need to go buy the car, or oh, I should upgrade to a different apartment or house. I need to go on a trip so that I can post my social media.
Yeah, and not enjoy the actual experience of being there in the country. But I look so pretty, and we're not undermining that you look pretty, because you do look nice, and this outfit is banging, absolutely. However, did you do it for you, or did you do it for people to see? And the other issue that we have with our brains with the mass media is our biological makeup has not caught up with the technology.
Right.
So we are constantly getting this dopamine fix of like less than 1% of what people are revealing that they're experiencing based off of what you see. So the brain takes it as the whole picture.
Okay, keep talking. I like this. I like where we're going.
So now we're in a space of people's perception of what they think the person's life is based off of seeing them on social media for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. How old is Instagram now? Instagram is like a cool 12 years old now. Like you may have had a friend on your friend list who you've never met, but when Instagram first started, you liked each other's stuff, and you've been seeing the trajectory of their life. And because you're not having any interpersonal conversations with this person, you're only seeing less than 1% of their life. You take what they're showing as the whole picture of their life.
Yeah.
And what that ignites in you is self-doubt, low self-esteem. Now you're in your space like, oh, maybe I should buy this, and maybe I should do this, and maybe I should do that. It's also pushing the narrative around consumerism.
Yeah. I love this. So really, I think what we're talking about in all of this, right? Like we're connecting a bunch of dots here. And obviously, if, people are listening, they can reach out to Grace and hire her for more expert care. But I think what we're talking about is interpersonal relationships. And so what you're saying is to really know oneself, you got to shut all that shit down.
Get connected to yourself so you can get connected to other people. I put a post on Facebook years ago. This is when Facebook first started. I'm not trying to date myself because right? But I put a post that said, if it wasn't for social media, I probably would see my friends.
Oh.
So we're talking about maybe 2009, 2008. I wrote a post like that, and I didn't realize what social media was creating, but I did recognize I wasn't seeing my friends as often because we were liking each other's pictures.
Yeah.
And because, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and you see their pictures, they appear to be one way, so you might not be checking in on each other the same way.
You're not.
Right?
You're not at all. Because it's like, so-and-so looks happy. And sometimes even like looking inward, if you have a space of isolation, so-and-so looks happy. Why would they want to hear from me?
Damn, Grace, with all the mic drops today. I mean, I don't know how our listeners are doing, but I'm over here. My brain is just, and the funny thing is I know the impacts of social media. I'm super keen on this topic in this conversation, but I think what you're talking about is how we're losing a sense of self and also a false sense of community.
And it's not to undermine what social media has created, right? Because social media has connected people from all walks of life who have made tremendous strides together.
Definitely.
Political platforms. There's a lot of friendships that have come out of social media. And it's not to undermine it, but it's also to look at the people that you did know in real life. When was the last time you actually saw them? Right?
Yeah.
Even if you live in close proximity, when was the last time you actually saw them? like you might see somebody's child, like they posted their baby since they were born and now their kid is in junior high school.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to that kid's birthday party? Even if you don't have kids on your own, like have you ever been to their birthday party? Like do you really know like the parameters of their personality? But you've seen it on social media, so you feel connected to that. So that's a pseudo sense of community.
And the pseudo sense of community is essentially why, I mean, I think this is me speaking for myself and my own belief system here. I believe that it's part of why we're seeing so much more anxiety, depression, child behavioral issues. Because if you think about as an adult, I can barely comprehend what the hell's happening to me behind the scenes. Like I can sit here, I can have this logical conversation with you, but there are impacts that are deep rooted, right? This is us talking about like I'm isolating myself and I'm not knowing myself, right? So I can imagine the implications this is having on the younger generation. Like what's gonna happen here?
So as you know, well, for people who don't know who are listening, there's a lot of conversation around legislation around social media.
Yeah.
So for our Gen Alpha, we have to ensure that we are not projecting a falsehood so that way our children do not feel like they have to also project a falsehood. Right. Because we are losing authenticity minute by minute, year after year, where it's become the normalcy to project a falsehood of what's actually occurring. And that's why we're losing our kids to suicide. We're losing our children to eating disorders. We're losing our children to bullying. We're losing our children to self-harm. And we're losing our children to addiction because their brains are so wrapped on how it looks and there's no conversation or interaction about how it feels. In addition to the addiction around the actual devices. And we're not shaming parents around when you need a break and your kid needs to be on the iPad playing that game because you got to figure out what you're going to do for dinner and you are emotionally spent from that job and your husband didn't take out the trash and now you're pissed off. That's not what we're doing. It's looking at how much time are you actually spending with your children to figure out how do they feel connected to you so they are not babysitted by the social media, by the devices. I think let's put a cap on it. I'm not saying obliterate it altogether. Some people's lifestyles, you cannot do that, and it's a lifesaver. Fine, whatever. But how are we capping it? Is it being regulated? Is my kid ready to throw me out the window if I don't give them the iPad? Because right? Because if they are ready, if my kid is ready to kick my ass because I didn't give them the iPad, what am I teaching my kid around emotional regulation in itself? Oh, you get to have what you have, and you get to want what you want, and there's no conversation about delayed gratification. Right. And then we wonder why people are like by the wayside. What are we creating? What kind of world are we creating?
A very scary one, in my opinion. Yeah. And I think this is conversations, right? It's having conversations. So it's understanding. You know, I think that's the key is like, I agree with you. Do whatever you want. Like you want to give your kid a shit ton of screen time. That's on you. But look at their behavior because their behavior is communicating something. And be an adult and have conversations about what they're watching, what they're ingesting. Like I definitely, you know, I have a 10-year-old. Ruby loves, you know, her Netflix and chill days. Like we live in Oregon, it rains a lot. So there's, you know, you get burnt out on all the other activities, right? And sometimes we just don't want to go outside and we want to sit inside and chill, right? So but there was a moment where like I sat down and I was like, we're watching what you want to watch together. And then I was like, okay, you're not watching that show. And she was like, why? And I was like, because this is directly correlated to the way that you're sassing off on me. The way that this kid is sassing off to the mom is exactly what we are struggling with. And so this show goes over here. What's next?
Yeah. And then also even thinking it from the parameters of, yes, do what you want with your kid, but you're not always going to be there for your kid. Your kid has to be in society. They have to be in community.
And there's no instant gratification outside of social media, because when you work, you got to wait to get paid. Yeah.
Yeah. And this instantaneous society that we're living in, the screen time and the social media is putting the threshold lower and lower and lower. So that's what I mean when I say our biological makeup is not catching up to the technology.
And I don't think it's meant to, right? Like it won't.
It's not. It won't, and it's not.
Yeah.
Because there is a generation that knew a life before social media, and like the patience threshold is different from the generations after that.
Oh my God, you're so right. I've never thought about that. Just patience in itself. You're like nail on the head on that one. Wow. And this is kind of too, I think, we're on this topic of social media. Like, this is where we're getting the bad information, right? This is the toxic positivity. This is the perfectionism that you and I have talked about before. Tell me more about what this is actually doing to our mental well-being.
It is, aside from destroying parts of it, right? It is creating a society that is more focused on how things look versus how they actually feel. So then there is a falsehood around the self-care that people think that they're doing. Well, it's like, well, I go to Pilates and I go to yoga and I practice Zen is keep, but you're a mean girl.
Yeah.
So are these quote unquote practices that you're engaging in for face value because of the projection that you want to put into the world, or do you actually embody these things?
Yeah, the feeling and embodiment. So tell me about that, because I'm not afraid of feeling things, but there's definitely like a piece of these triggers that I have, these boundaries that I, like you said, like they're coming up probably because they really need to be there. And it's not that I'm afraid of it. It's partially, I don't want to take the time to do it. So, there are people who are listening right now who are like, if I feel that, I won't survive. What would you say to that person?
I would say that you've already survived the other feelings. So this part of growing is just another thing that you're going to survive.
Yeah.
And looking at it from the perspective of, it's either I'm going to accept the life that I have and suffer in silence and be miserable, or I'm going to take real change around my life to shift the trajectory of my life in a way that's going to work for me, but also work for the people around me. And also recognizing even the people around me, it may not work for them, but that does not mean that it does not need to be implemented.
Right. It doesn't mean my life can't get better.
Exactly. A part of a boundary is also recognizing if someone is having an adverse reaction to your boundary, that means you probably need to implement it, because they probably benefited from you not having a boundary.
Ooh, say more about that, because I think that's a big one for a lot of my personal clients.
So there's an expectation in order to be in relationship with people that we have to appease them. But a part of every relationship is growth and conflict. We just have to learn how to fight right. And if we learn how to fight right, we can preserve any relationship. But if we are running from conflict like it's the worst thing that could happen, and we focus too much on the abandonment portion of life, or this person is going to be mad at me, then who ends up suffering? You do. Because you have now put yourself in a predicament where I can only be okay if my environment is okay. And then what that creates in your relationships is you only are happy when the person is happy. You're sad when they're sad. You don't honor your own feelings, and you project what's going on with the person as a distraction to what's actually going on with you. So boundary setting is not only about like setting, like quote unquote, setting a boundary and like, oh, you can't do this to me. It's about self-preservation. That's the real self-care.
Yeah. I had this visual while you were talking about like I like you remember Gumby? I am gonna date myself. Gumby, right? He's super bendy. So I had this visual as you were talking about somebody like bending to like
Mm-hmm.
fit.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you were talking about boundaries, I saw like these wooden and steel planks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like I thought of my yoga training where like you stand in that power pose, right? Where you're upright, where you're straight, like these wood and steel. So really what a boundary is self-preservation
Yeah.
because it's allowing you to stand confidently in life, right? Hands on the hips, chest up, you're erect, you're straight, just like that wooden post or
Mm-hmm.
that beam versus if you don't have boundaries, you're a Gumby.
You're all over the place. You're all
Yeah.
over the place. Yeah.
And there's no center, there's no core, there's no like heart led. Like I'm coming into this season where I'm really leading with my heart. You know, I'm in this muddy industry where
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of noise and I don't want to do it that way. And so I
Mm-hmm.
really have been cracking my heart open and being like, how do I want to lead? And so I do actually find myself a lot noticing those physical cues of like is my chest out, am I like, is my heart open, or am I kind of like contracting and like going in and like getting lost in my own thoughts. So damn.
Definitely. And I want to add on to that. It's not only not conforming to whatever the other person wants around the boundary is also set to preserve the relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if I don't preserve the relationship, then what ends up happening is what? Disconnection. Then we leave things to fall by the wayside because we didn't say something earlier. And then that's why a lot of relationships, romantic, friendship, familial relationships get thrown to the wayside. It's like, oh, you don't talk to so and so anymore? Oh, you know.
Yeah, and with that too, like let's talk about this. We're going to go over 30 minutes just for a second because I think this is important. When we don't create that closure, right? It's almost more self-deprecating or what's the word? What am I trying to say? Deprecating? Is that the word? Yeah. Okay. So you because I know that to be true for past relationships. They didn't end the right way, right? And so they're still in there. Like that's part of where I'm going to be like I'm going to counseling because this is trauma that needs healing, right? This is not a coaching there's no coaching fix. I've been trying to coach myself out of this shit forever. Doesn't work. Like that's why counseling is different than coaching. That's why therapy is existent. And I get it because I'm seeing how I was bypassing. I'm bypassing this situation. So can you tell us just a little bit about that?
So, are we talking about the bypassing?
Yeah, like the bypassing versus creating closure.
For sure. So just for context, you're not always going to get closure. Sometimes closure has to be a thing
choice.
that you create. Yeah, it has to be a choice that you create. Yeah. In addition, some people do not want to have the qualifying conversations because then that would also mean that they would have to look in the mirror for the transgressions that they've done to you, because then that would dismantle the perception of that you were the only person in the wrong.
Got it. Okay.
So you have to make a decision if this is a conversation worth having, where it's not going to bring any harm to me, or disrupt my life to the point of like danger. Like we don't want to put people in situations where they're finding closure from people who abuse them. That's not what we're doing. No. That closure has to come from self. But for relationships that we've had for quite some time, your best girlfriend, people that you've worked with, that you've had working relationships with, interpersonal relationships with, and for whatever reason you stopped talking or they did something to you that you didn't bring to their attention, instead of keeping score and tallying, nip it in the bud the first time so you don't have to tally to the point of where you just let the person hang themselves and now you're looking at yourself and they're looking at themselves like, oh, I don't talk to so and so anymore.
Yeah.
And getting over that also with the closure portions, like you've done this a few times, I'd appreciate if you didn't do it anymore.
Yeah. Direct
Name the behavior.
communication.
Yeah. Name the behavior, state that you don't like it, and then co-create what it could look like. Because even if the person wants to engage in a relationship with you, they may not know how. So it's also your responsibility to say, this is how I need my people to show up. Are you able to do that? They may or may not want to. It's not an indictment on you. It's just they may be communicating the capacity that they have to show up in the relationship.
Right. Oof. You know, and I think that this like brings us back full circle to self-care is really coming back to the self, and it's really starting to have these types of conversations so that you can find joy.
Definitely. Self-care is leaving perfectionism by the wayside. That's what it is. Understanding that it doesn't exist and no one can live up to it.
Good Lord. How freeing is that? I mean, I hope if anyone walks away with anything, they walk away with a little exhale around like, nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah. Grace, this has been amazing. I definitely see so many opportunities for you to come back. So if you're listening right now, we'd love to know what it is that you'd like us to deep dive further. So make sure that you're sending us all the DMs. You can send notes in on the show. Grace, where can people connect with you and hire you for your expertise?
For sure. They can find me at theglamourmethod.com. That's how it's said. It's how it's spelled. Glamour, GLAMOUR, method.com. You can connect with me on social media at the.g.lamour.method. On Instagram, on TikTok. Send me an email. I'm always here to converse with people. Yeah.
We'll make sure all that gets in the show notes. Thank you, Grace. I hope that, you know, you keep doing the work that you're doing. I know it's amazing. I love following you, and, you know, I hope more people seek out your services, because I think in my own personal life, they're invaluable. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Have a beautiful day, everyone. We'll see you on the next show.